Hey everybody, welcome to the Mana Leak. I'm John as always, and today we are going to finish up the Zendikar Rising set review by looking at all of the green cards, the artifact cards, and the land cards. Just a reminder, I am recording this on Twitch with Twitch chat up above me and rating cards over here, and we are doing this on the day before the full set was revealed, so I am going to be missing I think one green card and two artifact cards, but they're not going to change the way that I rate these cards. You will find those cards at the end of this video. They just won't be in the correct place during the video. Up first, we have Adventure Awaits. Adventure Awaits is 1 and a green for a sorcery at common. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. If you didn't put a card into your hand this way, draw a card. This is a cool little bonus. This is a spell that we've seen a bunch of times in various variations, Adventurous Impulse and things like that. It's just a nice little green fix my hand kind of thing, or top deck fix my top deck plan. You know, it's a card that you play if you have a spot for. It's kind of around the like C range. You'll play it if you have a spot, and if you don't, you don't play it. I do like that if you whiff, so like if you look at your top 5 cards and they're all lands, you still get to like shuffle them away and then, or not shuffle, put them on the bottom of your library. You still get to draw a card, which is a cool little bonus. I like the way they templated this, but it's just a C. Up next is Ancient Green Warden. Ancient Green Warden is 4 green for a creature elemental at Mythic. It's a 5/7 with reach. You may play land cards from your graveyard. If a land card entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. 5/7 for 6 reach. Sure, that's some stats that I'll pay for. Play land cards from my graveyard. That's probably not that big of a deal. I don't know how my land cards are reliably getting to the graveyard in limited in green, but perhaps they end up in there somehow. Maybe my opponent's blue-black mill rogues. If a land enters the battlefield, it triggers landfall twice. That's a payoff. That's a payoff for landfall. This is going to be a very good card. It's built around, obviously. If you somehow don't really have landfall, this is like a C, maybe a C+. It's just kind of a big, dumb creature if you don't have landfall. But I think it's going to be pretty hard for you to not have landfall. And if you do take this early, build around landfall. There you go. Unfortunately, this does not allow you to replay the modal double-faced cards because they are spells or creatures in the graveyard. They are only ever lands when they are on the battlefield upside down. Otherwise, they're always their front face, unfortunately. But yeah, this is a fine card if you're in green, and if you are in landfall, it's going to be great. It's like an A-, probably just an A if you're in landfall. If you're not, oh well. Up next, we've got a Shia, Soul of the Wild. A Shia, Soul of the Wild is 3 green for a legendary creature elemental at Mythic. It's a star. A Shia, power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, so presumably it's a 5/5 at least. Non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. Oh, would you look at that? Your other creatures become forest lands, which means this is not just a 5/5 for 5 because you have 5 lands. Assuming you have other creatures, it's going to be even bigger. And you're ramping. This is... this card, I love this card. This card's really good. This card's really, really good. It's big on its own. It doesn't have trample or anything like that, right? So it's just going to get chump blocked forever. But it, you know, potentially ramps you like crazy. You are going to get to dump your hand after playing this card. And then, yeah, I think this card's really good. I think it's in the A range. I think it's pretty hard for this card to not just be very good. I guess ramping at turn 5 is, I say this all the time, ramping on turn 5 isn't actually that good. But we're not ramping by like 1 mana. You know, we're ramping by as many creatures as we have on the battlefield. Mana. Yeah, I think this card's really good. Maybe it is just an A- because it's lacking any trample or anything like that. But I'm fine with A- for this. I think it's a very good card. It's going to be the first pick in most packs. All packs, probably. Up next is Bala Get Recovery. Bala Get Recovery is 2 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Return target card from your graveyard to your hand. I never really like these cards. If they're at instant speed, they get a little bit better, but I never find a spot in my deck for these cards. Well, would you look at that? What if you put this card into your land slot? Because it is a tapped green source, that means this card is much better than it would otherwise be. It's hard to grade these cards. We've talked about this. I'm not even going to give a joke grade to this. I'm just going to tell you it's a very good card that you should pick highly and play 100% of the time. Up next is Broken Wings. Broken Wings is 2 and a green for an instant at common. Destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying. This is a sideboard only card. You should never be main decking this. Out of the sideboard, it's going to be a very good card when there is a creature with flying, an artifact, or an enchantment. So that's a D+. By definition, don't main deck this. Bring it into the sideboard. Up next is Canopy Bailoth. Canopy Bailoth is 3 and a green for a creature beast at common. It's a 4/3 with landfall. Whenever a land ETBs, it gets +2/+2. It's the standard landfall trigger. Sure. This is totally fine. It's a C+. If you are in the landfall deck, this is going to be a 6/5, some number of turns, a lot of number of turns. Even if you're not in the landfall deck, this is a good card. This is almost vanilla test passing, right? Like it's just missing 1 point of toughness here. This is a strong C+. I'll play multiples of these. Seems good. Up next is Crag Plate Bailoth. Crag Plate Bailoth is 5 green for a creature beast at rare. It's a 6/6 with kicker 2 and a green. This spell can't be countered. It has hexproof. It has haste. If Crag Plate Bailoth was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. It has hexproof. I hate hexproof. I think hexproof ruins the game of Magic. But it's pretty expensive. So I think that's going to keep this in check. I don't think you're reliably going to be losing to this a whole lot. If your opponent gets it down, sure, you probably just die. Because it's a 6/6. You can't counter it. You can't target it. It's got haste. If it's late in the game, it's, what, a 10/10? That's pretty scary. But I think the fact that it's 7 mana on the front end is going to keep this in check a little bit. So I don't think this card's actually all that good. I think it's just way too expensive for its own good. If this format is fast, this is like an F. If this format is slow, you still have to build around this. You still have to get ramp in. You still have to make sure that you're surviving. If you're doing all of that, then maybe it's a B. But yeah, be careful. I think odds are this card is going to be too expensive to really go too deep on. Up next is Dauntless Survivor. Dauntless Survivor is 1 and a green for a creature human warrior at common. It's a 1/1 when Dauntless Survivor enters the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So it's a 2/2 for 2 if you want it to be. If your counter is going to be more at home on a trampler or a first striker or a flyer or just something else, you have that option too, and you have a nice little chump blocker. This is a C+. I think this is a bear with an upside that I'm pretty happy to give a C+ to. I'll play these guys. I'll play these guys a fair bit. And if I'm black-green and I get bonuses for those +1/+1 counters, even better. Up next is Gnarly Colony. Gnarly Colony is 1 and a green for a creature beast at common. It's a 2/2 with kicker 2 and a green. If Gnarly Colony was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. This one, oh, this is a black-green. Counters pay off. It's a 2/2 for 2, so you're going to play it anyways, and it makes your creatures with +1/+1 counters have trample, much like Pride Malkin? Yeah, Pride Malkin was the name of it in M21. And then, yeah, if you do have the mana to kick it, well, why not make it a 4/4 with trample for 5 mana? This is very good. I like this card quite a bit. I think it's a very strong C+. This could even creep up. Yeah, it probably doesn't creep up into the B- range. I think it's just a strong C+. If you are heavy into counters, it's going to play even a little bit better than that. Up next is Inscription of Abundance. Inscription of Abundance is 1 and a green for an instant at rare. It's got kicker 2 and a green. Choose one. If this spell was kicked, choose any number instead. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Target player gains X life, where X is the greatest power among creatures they control. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. This one, unlike the other inscriptions we've seen, I love every bit of it, whether I'm kicking it or not. And a big part of that is because it's instant. I will pay 2 mana at instant speed to get 2 counters. I will pay 2 mana at instant speed to fight. It's not my favorite thing with it, a power and toughness boost or something, but I'll do it. Pay 2 mana to gain X life. Well, I won't really do that, but I can just pay 5 and do all 3. I like this card a fair bit. I think it's the best of the inscriptions, to be honest. I think this one's a B+. I like this quite a bit. Inscription of Abundance. I like ye a lot. Up next is Iridescent Hornbeetle. Iridescent Hornbeetle is 4 and a green for a creature insect at uncommon. It's a 3/4. At the beginning of your end step, create a 1/1 green insect creature token for each +1/+1 counter you've put on creatures under your control this turn. 3/4 for 5, a little bit expensive there, but I get an insect for every counter I put on creatures. Feels kind of win more. If I'm reliably putting multiple counters on creatures, aren't I just winning anyways? Wouldn't this be better if my 5-drop was a trampler or a flyer or something other than a 3/4? 5 mana pulls me back on this just a little bit. I think this probably could have been a 4-drop. Obviously, you need to be the black-green counters deck. If you're not the black-green counters deck, I don't think you play this card at all. I don't think you ever want a 3/4 for 5. If you're the black-green counters deck, this is maybe like a C+. I'm not stoked on it. The effect there just isn't making me jump out of my chair. C+ for Iridescent Hornbeetle. Up next is Jaraga Visionary. Jaraga Visionary is 3 and a green for a creature elf wizard at common. It's a 3/2. When it ETBs, draw a card. We had a 2/2 for 3 that tapped for mana and drew a card. Jaraga Visionary got worse. It's still fine. It's not great. I feel like we saw this card. It was in blue. It was 4 mana, draw a card. I think it was an Aether Revolt or Kaladesh, and it was not good. Being a wizard, I think the Kaladesh one was a 2/2 as well, which hurt it more. 3/2 for 4, draw a card, and it's a wizard. So the trick here, we haven't really talked about this. Green does not have party members, really. There's like 2 of each type of party member in green. There's like 2 warriors and like 2 wizards and like 2 rogues. So you're not really caring that this is a wizard. So I think this card's just a C. I think it's just a C. I think you include it if you need a creature, if you have a spot, and if you don't bother. Doesn't have evasion. I'm not a big fan of 3/2s for 3 usually, unless they have good abilities. 3/2 for 4, I'm not stoked on either. So C for Jaraga Visionary. Up next is Kazandu Mammoth. Kazandu Mammoth is 1 green for a creature elephant at rare. It's a 3/3 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. It's also a land if you want it to be. If you want it to be. So this is a fine card. This one's weird. This one's weird because I'm not immediately like you're still playing this 100% of the time. But like you never play this as a forest. Like and by never I mean 1% of the time you play this as a forest. You just play this as a 3/3 for 3 that attacks like a 5/5 frequently. That's a good card. That's like it doesn't have trample or anything. I think this one gets a grade, and I think this one's just a C+. I think it's a very good, efficient creature. Maybe even gets a B-. And I don't think I'm ever playing this as a forest. Like, I'll play this when I'm incredibly desperate, but otherwise I'm just playing the 3-drop 100% of the time. Yeah, B- for Kazandu Mammoth. Up next is Kazandu Nectar Pot. Kazandu Nectar Pot is 1 and a green for a creature insect at common. It's a 1/3 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. This is the weakest payoff you could ever hope for. It's a weird spider-looking thing, but it doesn't have reach. I'm going to assume this has reach all the time, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I don't like this card. This is a C-. Even in the landfall deck, you're not like falling out of your chair to play this card. If you've got a spot, you'll play it, but 1 life for a landfall trigger, I'm not super happy about that. C-. If you have to, play it. Don't feel bad that you have to play it, but try not to. Up next is Kazandu Stomper. Kazandu Stomper is 5 and a green for a creature beast at common. It's a 6/5 with trample. When Kazandu Stomper enters the battlefield, return up to 2 lands you control to their owner's hand. 6/5 trample for 6 with a downside that in these colors probably isn't. If it's a downside, you're not playing this card, right? If you're green, black, very little landfall, you're probably not playing the Stomper. But if you're green-white landfall or green-red landfall, you play the 6/5, and hey, look at that, you got some more landfall trigger lands into hand. So yeah, this is very deck-dependent. This ranges from don't play it to play it and be fine. You do have to return them. There is no May. Oh, sorry, it's up to 2 land. Oh, never mind, this card's good. I'm so used to looking for May that I forget to look for up to, because of course 0 lands is up to 2. Yeah, this is a 6/5 trampler for 6. This is basically a Colossal Dreadmaw with an upside when you want it and no downside ever. Never mind those words I was saying. This is a C+. Don't load up on them. You can't play too many 6-drops. Play 1, C+. Up next is Kalni Ambush. Kalni Ambush is 2 and a green for an instant at uncommon. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. Instant speed fight is cool. Fight is way less good when it doesn't pump power and or toughness. Keep that in mind. There was a time where Prey Upon was amazing. Prey Upon is no longer amazing. Making it instant speed makes it a little bit better. But again, it's a land. We can play this as a land if we just don't have creatures that can fight, but we're probably going to play this as a fight spell 99% of the time. It's a fine card. You'll play it always. Pick it highly. This one does kind of defy grades a little bit. It's around the B range, but we'll give it a... We will give it a Constellation Perforos. Up next is Lotus Cobra. Lotus Cobra is 1 and a green for a creature snake at rare. It's a 2/1 with landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, add 1 mana of any color. Lotus Cobra is great. It's a 2/1 for 2. It's a piker, which is like a CC minus, but it's going to ramp you for the turns that you care about ramp, which are turn 3 and turn 4 and turn 5. It's going to fix your mana a little bit, although it's not as consistent as you would hope. So don't get, super splashy just because you have a Lotus Cobra. But the card's very good. It's like a B. It's definitely not an A. But I think it's a B. I think a solid B for Lotus Cobra. This card's good. Played with it before. Is very good. Up next is Might of Marasa. Might of Marasa is 1 and a green for an instant at common. Kicker 2 and a green. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. If the spell was kicked, that creature gets +5/+5 until end of turn. This is, I think, still just a pretty meh combat trick. It's like an expensive giant growth on the one half, and on the other half, it's what? 1, 2, 3, 4. It's 5 mana. It's a very expensive 1 2/3 of a giant growth. This is my definition of a C-. If you have a spot in your deck, cool, put it in. But don't stretch your deck to try to put this in. Don't pick this highly. It's just a meh combat trick. C- for Might of Marasa. Up next is Marasa Brute. Marasa Brute is 2 and a green for a creature troll warrior. At common, it's a 3/3. It is a vanilla 3/3. There was a point where I really liked vanilla 3/3s. Centaur Courser, first time it came around, was a very good card. A vanilla 3/3 these days, you can usually find better. It's still a C. You'll still play it in some amount of decks where you just have a slot open and need it. But otherwise, you're not going, crazy for it. It is a warrior, so it is one of the 1 or 2 warriors that green has, but green's also not really looking for full party. Up next is Marasa Sproutling. Marasa Sproutling is 2 and a green for a creature plant elemental at uncommon. It's a 3/3 with kicker 1 and a green. When Marasa Sproutling enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, return target card with a kicker ability from your graveyard to your hand. 3/3 for 3. We just talked about it. 3/3 for 3, you can put it in your deck. It's like a C. If you are the kicker deck, if you have kicker things, and there is one that you can return, you can kick this to get it back. The versatility here is really nice because you can just play this as a 3/3 and you're not going to feel upset. And then sometimes you can play it for 5 mana and get probably some pretty good value out of it by returning that kicker ability card. So I think this is a C+. Does it? It might just hit into the B- range in the kicker deck. Yeah, this probably just hits into the B- range in the kicker deck. You're not paying too much for this, and getting back a kicker spell is a pretty big deal. If you're not in the kicker deck, if you've only got like a couple kicking around, or if you have none, this is a C to C+. Up next is Nissa's Zendikar. Nissa's Zendikar is 3 and a green for an enchantment aura at common. Enchanted land is a 4/4 elemental creature with reach and haste. It's still a land. When enchanted land dies, return that card to its owner's hand. So 4 mana, turn a land into a 4/4. It doesn't get vigilance. So you are losing a land for as long as you plan to attack with it. But when the land dies, you do get the land back, which means you're going to trigger landfall again because your opponent probably has to answer a 4/4 in some way. This is probably a card that just doesn't have room. There's too many more versatile cards, there's too many more powerful cards, there's too many more useful cards for this to really find a slot. I think this is a D+. I think you probably just don't play this card. Yeah, D+ for Nissa's Zendikar. Up next is Oran Reef Ooze. Oran Reef Ooze is 2 and a green for a creature ooze at rare. It's a 2/2. When it ETBs, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Could be itself. Whenever Oran Reef Ooze attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each attacking creature with a +1/+1 counter on it. This seems really good. 3/3 for 3 if I want it to be. And then when it attacks, it gets you get a counter for each attacking creature with a counter on it. So it's a 3/3 that just grows every time it attacks. That's a very ooze ability. We've seen that before, and it's been very tough to deal with. And it gives that sort of ooze ability to potentially a large quantity of the rest of your team. And you can, figure out if you want the counter on the ooze or not. I have a feeling you always want the counter on the ooze because you want the ooze to grow. If you don't put the counter on the ooze, I think it's going to be tricky to always attack in with a 2/2 ooze. You're going to lose it. So I think you put the counter on the ooze almost always, and I think that you're just going to ooze them out. If you're black-green counters, this is going to be great, and even if you're not, this card's really good. I think it's a pretty strong B. I like this card quite a bit. Seems very snowball-y. Up next is Rabid Bite. Here's a good green removal spell. 1 and a green for a sorcery at common. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. This is a bite, not a fight, so the other creature doesn't get to damage you back. This is also really good art. There's some decent art in this set. There's some bad art in this set, but there's some decent art. Yeah, Rabid Bite's always good. It's always like a B. It's always a pretty high pick. Again, it would be great if it was Hunter's Edge and gave a counter or something, but it doesn't. Rabid Bite is still very good. It's a B. It's going to be one of the best green commons. Up next is Reclaim the Wastes. Reclaim the Wastes is a single green mana for a sorcery at common. Kicker for 3. Search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. If this spell was kicked, search your library for 2 basic land cards instead of 1. If you're splashing, this card is a card that you're looking for. If you're not splashing, I don't think you want it. Yes, it gets you lands for your landfall deck, but you know what else gets you lands? Just drawing a card each turn, just playing Magic. Not playing this card. You could play a landfall card instead of this card. It would be way better. So yeah, I think this is splashing only. I don't really want this for the landfall deck. So this is kind of like a D. Play it when you're splashing, because when you're splashing, it's going to be really handy. And when you're not splashing, probably don't play it. Up next is Roiling Regrowth. Roiling Regrowth is 2 and a green for an instant at uncommon. Sacrifice a land. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So 3 mana, instant speed, ramp. Right? You get 2 lands, but you do have to sack a land. and fixing. So this one I think you do play even if you're not splashing, because it's going to let you ramp on turn 3, which is about where ramp starts to begin to die down. Turn 3 ramp is still nice. Turn 4 plus ramp is a little bit less good. It's instant speed, which means you can get landfall triggers at instant speed here. You get 2 landfall triggers off of this. This has a lot of playability in the landfall deck, whereas I don't want to play this in the landfall deck. I want to play this one in the landfall deck for sure. And I'll also play it to splash, I'll play it to ramp, etc. I think this card's just very good overall. I think this is a strong C+ in every deck, and I think in the landfall deck, you're even, or anywhere else, you're going to look at a B- for this. I think this card's really good and might get undervalued at the start. I'm not sure. Up next is Scale the Heights. Scale the Heights is 2 and a green for a sorcery at common. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. You gain 2 life. You may play an additional land this turn. Draw a card. 3 mana sorcery speed for a counter 2 life, an extra landfall trigger, and draw a card. I think there's better cards to play. In the landfall deck, I think there's way better cards to play. Yeah, this is basically Uro. It's right on the power level of Uro. Yeah, I think this is a C-. It's not even a combat trick. I think this is more in the D range. I think this is like a D+. I don't want to play this card in any deck. Up next is Scoot Swarm. Scoot Swarm is 2 and a green for a creature insect at rare. It's a 1/1. Landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. If you control 6 or more lands, create a token that's a copy of Scoot Swarm instead. Do you want to go wide? This can help you go wide. You're going wide with 1/1s. But this can help you go wide. Because, of course, your first few, you're just getting 1/1s. But when you get a Scoot Swarm copy, your next land gives you 2 Scoot Swarm copies. And then your next land gives you 4 Scoot Swarm copies. And then your next land gives you 16 Scoot Swarm copies. They're all still just 1/1s, but that's going to get out of control. You know, even if they stay 1/1s, you don't have a way of pumping them all. Eventually, when you've got 25 1/1s on the board, you probably have lethal. You just turn them all sideways. This card's interesting. It takes a lot of work to get this going. You're not getting that second Scoot Swarm until turn probably 6 or later. So I think this is probably going to get overrated. I think this card's going to be tricky to go off with, but when you go off, it's going to be crazy. So I'm gonna dial back the excitement a little bit to a B-. B-? Yeah. I'm going to dial this back to a B-. But be aware that sometimes your opponent is going to stall the game. They are going to drop 3-4 lands after their 6th land drop, and it's going to be a nightmare. B- for Scoot Swarm. Up next is Skyclave Pickaxe. Skyclave Pickaxe is a single green mana for an artifact equipment at uncommon. When Skyclave Pickaxe enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. Landfall. Whenever a land ETBs, creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Equip for 2 and a green. So this is an equipment that does nothing until you get that landfall trigger. When you get that landfall trigger, it's pretty good. Turn any creature you want into a Step Lynx. And then if that creature does die, pay 2 and a green to put it on. I think this one's good. It takes a card slot, which sucks, but it's only 1 mana. I think this one's good. I think if you're the landfall deck, I think you'll play this. I guess the one trick here is if you're a landfall deck, you're probably playing more lands than normal. You have less card slots to work with. Yeah, I think it'll be a big question on if you can afford the card slot for this card. I think if you can, I think this is like a C+. But we'll see if you can afford a card slot for this. I'm not certain if you'll be able to or not. C+ to start with Skyclave. We'll keep an eye on it. Up next is Springmantle Cleric. Springmantle Cleric is 4 and a green for a creature elf cleric at uncommon. It's 2/3. When it ETB, It ETBs with a +1/+1 counter on it for each color of mana spent to cast it. No. No. This is a 2/3 for 5 if I just pay green. Odds are I'm paying one other color. It's a 3/4 for 5. No. No, I don't want this card. I don't want this card in green-black. I don't want this card. It's too much mana. Like, you need to be playing the Omnath deck. And you shouldn't be playing the Omnath deck. You should not be playing the Omnath deck. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It's a you do count the green, right? So it is a 3/4 for 5 or a 4/5 for 5. Doesn't change anything. I still don't want those stats for those costs. If I'm splashing, I still don't want this card because I'm probably splashing for something powerful, and this card ain't powerful. This card's a D. I don't think you ever want to play it. Up next is Strength of Solidarity. Strength of Solidarity is a single green mana for a sorcery at common. Choose target creature you control. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature in your party. Green's not the party color. We've talked about this. There's only 2-ish of each of them in green. So most of your party is probably going to come, and some of them are unplayable. So most of the party creatures are going to come from your other color. If we're green-white, all the landfall creatures are not party members. They're cats and scoots. If we're green-black, if we're green-blue, it's sorcery speed. I don't want this card. I don't want this card at all. I think it's an F. Yeah, this is an F. I'm never playing this card. Up next is Swarm Shambler. Swarm Shambler is a single green mana for a creature fungus beast at rare. It is a 0/0. It enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it, so it's a 1/1 for 1. Whenever a creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls, create a 1/1 green insect creature token. Pay 1, tap, put a +1/+1 counter on Swarm Shambler. This is Chronometon. This is Chronometon, a card from M13, I think. It was an uncommon, it was a 1/1 artifact, and you could pay 1 and tap it to put a counter on it. It was good. It was really good because you just grow it until you can attack with it. And when you can't attack with it anymore, you keep growing it. If your opponent kills this, it replaces itself with a 1/1 at least. That's a thing. And of course, hopefully you're in black-green with some other counter payoffs. I think this card's pretty good. It's slow. It's not a bomb. It's not an A range card. I think this is more like a B. Yeah, a B. A B if we're in the black-green counters deck. I like this card quite a bit. It really reminds me of Chronometon. I think it could surprise some people. Yeah, let's go with a B for Swarm Shambler. Up next is Tajuru Blightblade. Tajuru Blightblade is a single green mana for a creature elf rogue at common. It's a 1/1 death touch. Yup, it's Typhoid Rats. I love it. This is my favorite stat. I said 3/1 for 1 and a white's my favorite stats, but I love 1/1 for 1 with death touch. This is a great card. This is, as much as I'm talking it up, this is like a C+. You're always playing it, but you're not picking this first or second or third or fourth or maybe fifth. You start to pick it up. Yeah, usually this is in black, but this is a great card. It's a very strong C+. Play them. Play them. They're real good. Up next is Tajuru Paragon. Tajuru Paragon is 1 and a green for a creature elf at rare. She's a 3/2. She's also a cleric rogue warrior wizard. Kicker for 3. When Tajuru Paragon enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, reveal the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a card that shares a creature type with it from among them into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So it's a 2 mana 3/2. That's good stats. That's like a C+. If you kick it, you can go and get guaranteed, I would say, a creature. You're going to have cleric, rogue, warrior, or wizard. They're probably not going to be green. They might be green, but they're probably not going to be green. Or maybe you get an elf. Maybe you get an elf. Goes to your hand, doesn't go to the battlefield, and that costs us 5 mana. 5 mana, 3/2 draw a creature card's pretty good. Yeah, I think this card's all around pretty decent. It's around the like B range. BB minus. It's in the BB minus area. Be aware, this does not give you full party. Party counts one creature and its type. So this is not an elf cleric and an elf rogue and an elf warrior. You have to pick one of those classes for this creature when counting party. So yeah, BB minus for Tajuru Paragon. Up next is Tajuru. Boy, I wish this word was easier to say considering how often it's come up. Tajuru Snarecaster. Tajuru Snarecaster is 2 and a green for a creature elf rogue at common. It's a 1/4 with reach. Sideboard only. It's a giant spider kind of effect. If you need something to deal with flyers, side this in, but otherwise it's a D+. Up next is Tangled Florahedron. Tangled Florahedron is 1 and a green for a creature elemental, uncommon, 1/1, tap to add green. It's a Llanowar elf for 2. It's also a forest on the back side there. This is a great card. This is a great card. I'm playing this as the Florahedron 99% of the time, and I'm super happy to do so. 2 mana dork, love it. Sure, 1 mana is better, but 2 mana is just as good. If I need a landfall trigger or a forest, sure, but I'm just happy to play Tangled Florahedron here. This is a B. This is a straight up B. Up next, we've got Taunting Arbor Mage. Taunting Arbor Mage is 2 and a green for a creature elf wizard at uncommon. It's a 2/3 with kicker 3. When Taunting Arbor Mage enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, all creatures able to block target creature this turn do so. Yeah. 2/3 for 3 is pretty filler stats, but 5 and a green? 6 mana? 6 mana win the game? This says 6 mana win the game. Quite a bit. You make all of your opponent's creatures block your crappiest one, and you attack with everything else. And unlike Prized Unicorn? Whatever unicorn it is, your opponent doesn't even see it coming. I think this card's really good. You do need to be a heavy creature deck, preferably go wide, although, you know, even getting through like your 6/6 could be the thing that wins. I think this card's going to be underrated. Man, it's almost the definition of a bomb because you play it and win the game, right? The problem, of course, is if your opponent kills the thing that you lured, well, there goes that. I'm going to keep this at a B+. I'm going to keep my expectations in check just a little bit, but B+, and I think this could be underrated like crazy. I'm going to take this very highly to start. Up next is Territorial Scythecat. Territorial Scythecat is 2 and a green for a creature cat at common. It's a 2/1 with trample, landfall. Whenever land ETBs under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Territorial Scythecat. 2/1 for 3 trample, not happy about that, but the second it gets the first counter on it, it is a C, and then any more counters, it goes way up from there. I think this is a pretty strong C+ in every deck. And if you're landfall specifically, and maybe you can trigger this a little bit more than average, it's even a little bit better than that. Strong C+ for Territorial Scythecat. Up next is Turntimber Symbiosis. Turntimber Symbiosis is 4 green for a sorcery at Mythic. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. If that card has converted mana cost 3 or less, it enters the battlefield with 3 additional +1/+1 counters on it. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. It's also the green bolt land. So yeah, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 mana. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. Pop down a creature. If it's a little itty bitty creature, it gets 3 counters. It's no longer a little itty bitty creature. Yeah, this is a great card because it is versatile. Early on, you're going to play this as a tapped green source. If you desperately need it to be untapped, you can pay 3 mana for it. If you top deck it late in the game, sure, get yourself a 7/7, or sorry, a 7 mana, at least probably 4/4, and potentially even bigger than that. This is a great card. Again, I think this is one that's kind of hard to give the exact rating. So as chat is suggesting here, I will rate this every single slash that lives between every grade. Up next is Vastwood Fortification. Vastwood Fortification is a single green mana for an instant at uncommon. Put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. It's also a tapped green land. This is again, one of those cards. It's not very good on either side of it, but you'll play it because you can put it into your deck as a forest. And if you find a situation where you don't need that forest, put a counter on something. It's not great. It's not amazing. It'll do the thing. Pick this pretty highly. Play it 100% of the time. It's technically in the game that you play it probably like a C-, but it's not a C-. Don't pick this like a C-. It's a... Oh, I'm running out of interesting things to use as joke grades. It is a Zendikar Rising canteen. I think that might be the last one we have to do that for. Up next is Vastwood Surge. Vastwood Surge is 3 and a green for a sorcery at uncommon. Kicker for 4 generic. Search your library for up to 2 basic land cards. Put them onto the battlefield. Tapped, then shuffle your library. If this spell was kicked, put 2 +1/+1 counters on each creature you control. Well, that card got a whole lot better there right at the end. 4 mana. Go get 2 basic lands. That card you are only ever playing if you're splashing. I don't think I'm playing this in the landfall deck. 4 mana, get 2 landfall triggers. Is that good enough? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe it is. Maybe I do play this in the landfall deck. But if it's a little bit later in the game and I can pay 8 mana, don't know where I got that 8 mana for, but if I pay 8 mana, a counter on everything, that's nifty. That's really expensive. Boy, I keep talking myself into and out of this card quite a lot. It does ramp as well. Maybe this card, and this is a new idea here, so everybody pay attention. Maybe because this card is so versatile and has different ways that you can use it, this card's just like a C+. Yeah, this card's probably just a C+. It goes in a bunch of different ways, and you can use it in a bunch of different ways. Yeah, let's go C+ here. Man, don't let your opponent playing this card get to 8 mana and counter up their team and get 2 landfall triggers off of it at the same time. Holy moly. Next up, we have Veteran Adventurer. Veteran Adventurer is 5 and a green for a creature human and uncommon. It's a 5/5. It's also a cleric, rogue, warrior, and wizard. Costs 1 less to cast for each creature in your party, and it's got vigilance. 6 mana, 5/5 vigilance. No. 5 mana, 5/5 vigilance. I guess. 4 mana, sure. 3 mana, you bet. It's almost never going to cost 3 mana. It's very rarely going to cost 4 mana. It's most likely to cost 5 mana, which makes this just okay. The party thing, like I said, green doesn't want parties. There's way less party stuff in green. So I don't know how exactly this works out in the party. There's a lot about this set that I'm going to have to play with to really figure out. So I think this is around like a C. I think you can include it or not, and you're going to feel fine either way. Up next is Vine Gecko. Vine Gecko is 1 and a green for a creature elemental lizard. Not a wizard, it's a lizard. At uncommon, it's a 2/2. The first kicked spell you cast each turn costs 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast a kicked spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Vine Gecko. This is a payoff for the blue-green kicker deck for sure. 2/2 for 2. Cool. It's perfectly costed right then and there. My kicker spells are all 1 cheaper now, for the first one anyways. And this becomes a 3/3, then a 4/4, then a 5/5. This is great. Every kicker deck wants as many of these as possible. This is like a strong B- in the kicker deck. I think the 1 mana discount just knocks this up to a B. Yeah, I think this is just a B in the blue-green kicker deck. If you're not in the blue-green kicker deck, this is just a filler card, depending on how much incidental kicker you happen to have. But assuming you're in the right deck, this is a strong B. And that brings us to the end of the green cards. So we're going to go on to the artifacts. And then at the end of all of that, we will do the artifacts and green cards that I'm missing at the end of the video and wrap it up. So let's get going here with the first artifact. We have Forsaken Monument. Forsaken Monument is 5 generic mana for a legendary artifact at Mythic. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2. There are not very many. There's 1, I think. 2, maybe 3. Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, which you're not going to do very often, add an additional colorless. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, which you're not going to do very often, you gain 2 life. This is an F. You're never playing this in limited. It is absolutely not a limited card. Constructed, do whatever you want to do. Do whatever you want to do. But this has absolutely no home in limited. We're going to go through the colorless cards here, and you're going to see there's just not very much for this card. This is constructed only. Do not play unlimited. Up next is Lithoform Engine. Lithoform Engine is 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact at Mythic. Pay 2 tap, copy target activated or triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for that copy. Pay 3 tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for that copy. Pay 4 and tap, copy target permanent spell you control. I can't stop you from playing this. And I know y'all are going to play this. But this is limited. We don't have infinite mana to work with. So what permanents are you casting that you have a casual 4 mana left over to copy them? It'll happen. And it's a nice bit of value if you're copying your 2-drop because you have 6 mana. Sure, that's cool. It's a bonus. But you had to put this card in your deck. You had to pay 4 mana for it. 3 mana for instant sorcery. 2 mana for... I think this is constructed only. I think it's EDH only. I don't think this has a home in limited just because the 2, 3, 4 mana is pretty costly. It's pretty costly. The fact that it costs a card in your deck is pretty costly. Staple this onto a land and I'll play this. But... maybe the 2 mana for the activated or triggered ability in a landfall deck. Pay 2 mana, copy your landfall triggers. We'll see. I'll keep an eye on this. I suspect it's an F. I suspect it's just way too jank for limited. But we'll see. We'll see. Up next is Myriad Construct. Myriad Construct is 4 generic mana for an artifact creature construct at rare. It's a 4/4 with kicker 3. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each non-basic land your opponents control. When Myriad Construct becomes the target of a spell, sacrifice it and create a number of 1/1 colorless construct artifact creature tokens equal to its power. So it's a 4/4 for 4 that when it is targeted by anyone, freaks out and splits up into 4 1/1s. For 7 mana, it is anywhere from a 4/4 to an infinity. How many non-basic lands are your opponents going to be controlling in an average game of limited? There's 1 dual-faced card in each pack. That doesn't mean they're going to be playing all 3 of them because maybe they're not in their colors. I'm going to say it's an average of 2 to 3. I think if you're getting a large number of dual-faced cards, either A, you got lucky that nobody around you are in your colors and you're getting the on-color dual-faced cards, or people around you don't know how to draft the format. So 7 mana for a 6/6 is not really what I'm in for. 7 mana vanilla anything I'm not really in for, and you can't target this. I don't really like this card kicked. I think I'll play it as a 4/4 for 4 if I have a spot. And then, surprise, the versatility of, oh, hey, look, my opponent actually did end up with 7 non-basics. I'll pay 3 mana to make this an 11/11. So yeah, I think this is probably like a B-. I think this is going to be a 4/4 a lot of the time. And be careful, don't try to put equipment on this or anything. It would be bad. Although actually you could put the equipment on this. Sorry, you can put the equipment on this. Don't try to target this with a combat trick or anything. But yeah, let's go B- for this. Up next is Relic Amulet. Relic Amulet is 2 generic mana for an artifact and uncommon. Whenever you cast an instant, sorcery, or wizard spell, put a charge counter on Relic Amulet. Pay 2, tap, remove all charge counters from Relic Amulet. It deals that much damage to target creature. If this was any target, I would love this card. As is, it's still fine. Obviously, this is a blue-red card. You're not playing this in anything that isn't blue-red. But, you know, shock a creature, bolt a creature. I don't know if you're getting this too much higher than a bolt. I don't think this card's good. It requires a lot of work to go into it. You're not getting paid off. Like there's no bonus to doing this way. And there's even the downside of your opponent knows it's coming, right? So they're not going to, you know, they're really good 3/2 flyer. They're not going to play until you shock something else. I think this is around a C. I think there's a little bit too much work to make this be really good. Let's go C for Relic Amulet. Relic Axe is up next. Relic Axe is 2 generic mana for an artifact equipment at uncommon. When it ETBs, attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. If it's a warrior, it gets +2/+1 instead. Short Sword for 2 mana that auto-equips. If it's a warrior, +2/+1. That's a little bit better. That's a little bit better. Equip cost of 2, that's not super expensive. I think this is a fine piece of equipment if you're in an aggro deck and you have a spot. You can play this basically the same as Short Sword. If you have a spot, if it makes sense because you're aggro, sure, but I don't think you're going out of your way to get this into your deck. But yeah, this I think is like the prime non-rare equipment that the warrior deck really wants. So if you're in the warrior deck, this is like a strong C+. And I think if you're in any aggro deck and you have a spot, it's like a C++. But, you know, don't play this card too much, just like Short Sword. Be careful, play it where it should be played. Up next is Relic Golem. Relic Golem is 3 generic mana for an artifact creature golem at uncommon. It's a 6/6. Relic Golem can't attack or block unless an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, so this is a blue-black card. Pay 2, tap, target player mills 2 cards. It's a millstone. It's a millstone. Did you have to pay for millstone? I don't think you had to pay for millstone, did you? Hold. Oh, you did. Okay. I was wrong. You had to pay for millstone. Yeah, it's millstone that also at some point is a 6/6. I don't hate this. If I'm in the blue-black deck and I'm reasonably confident that, you know, I'm going to get 8 cards in their graveyard, getting a 6/6 for 3, cool. Having a millstone, I think I'm going to play this a lot more than I would, than people might expect, because I really like mill as a win condition. Man, what do I grade this? Like, there's going to be games where, because you got the right rogues down early, this is a 6/6 on turn 5, 4. I like this card. I think it's like, maybe a C+. I wanted to go into the B range because, of course, it's repeatable mill, but unlike Millstone, this is actually really vulnerable to all of the black removal. Whereas Millstone, they need artifact hate. Let's keep this at a C+, but I think I'll play this a little bit more than I might otherwise think. Relic Vial is up next. Relic Vial is 3 generic mana for an artifact at uncommon. Pay 2, tap, sacrifice a creature, draw a card. As long as you control a cleric, Relic Vial has whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This is the black-white relic artifact. So, 2 mana, sack a creature, draw a card. I never wanted to play Witch's Cauldron. Is that the one that was just in M21? Something Cauldron, whatever that Cauldron was in M21. I did not like it. And it only cost 1 mana to tap, sack, and draw, right? If I have a cleric, drain 1. So 2 mana, draw a card, drain 1, and I can't repeat it. I don't think I play this card. This card's got too many moving pieces. The mana that you have to put into it, the creature that you have to put into it. If I wasn't playing the Cauldron from M21, I don't think there's any way I'm playing this card in Zendikar. So maybe like D+. I can see spots where maybe you would want to play it. I just don't think I'm ever playing it. D+ for Relic Vial. Up next is Seagate Colossus. Seagate Colossus is 7 generic mana for a 7/5 artifact creature golem warrior at common. It costs 1 less for each creature in your party. I don't want this for 7 mana. I don't want it for 6 mana. I'll take it for 5. 4 or 3, obviously I'm in. I think this will depend on the party mechanic, and the fact that this is common says to me that the full party mechanic is not something that's going to happen very much. So yeah, I think this is like a D. I think it's a D. I think it might even be an F. I think there's just so many times where this is a 7 mana 7/5 or a 6 mana 7/5 with no trample, no evasion, no rules, no nothing. And that's not a card that I play. D-. D- for Seagate Colossus. Let's keep an eye on full party, but I think I'm right about everything. I think I'm right that full party is not going to happen. Up next is Skyclave Relic. Skyclave Relic is 3 generic mana for an artifact at rare. It's got Kicker 3. It's got Indestructible. When Skyclave Relic enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create 2 tapped tokens that are copies of it. Tap to add 1 mana of any color. It's an indestructible manalith. It's an indestructible manalith that if you have 6 mana, you can get more of them. You're not looking to ramp at 6 mana, but yeah, if you want fixing because you're splashing, here you go. Unfortunately, it's a rare. This is one of the rares where you're going to open the pack and go, "Oh, what did I get? What did I get? How am I going to win this draft?" And you see this card, and you go, "Oh, what removal did I open?" Yeah, this is a D. Like in a 2-color deck, don't play this. There's better ramp. If you really desperately want ramp, sure. If you're splashing, go ahead and play this and feel pretty okay with it. And, you know, if you have the mana, you're not going to make 3 of these if there's nothing else you're doing with it. That is gravy. It doesn't make the card worse because it has that option on it. But I think this is like a don't play it unless you're splashing. Up next is Spare Supplies. Spare Supplies is 2 generic mana for an artifact at common. Spare Supplies enters the battlefield tapped. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Pay 2, tap it, sack it, draw a card. Do y'all like drawing cards? This will draw you cards. So it's 4 mana for a divination on a layaway plan that you can't get right away. I don't think I'm ever playing this card. I'm not rewarded for playing this card, right? There's nothing that gives me bonuses for artifacts. There's nothing that gives me bonuses for sacrificing an artifact. There's no land on the backside of this card. There's nothing rewarding me for playing this card. So I just don't think there's a spot for this. I think this is an F. I think you just never play it. Like, there's a lot of playable cards in this set. I don't think you have a spot for this. In a core set, maybe you have a spot. In a core set 5 years ago, maybe you have a spot for this, but not in Modern Magic, I don't think. Up next is Stonework Pack Beast. Hey, look at that. Well, I guess we had a few other colorless creatures for our monument. One of our few colorless creatures. Stonework Pack Beast is 2 generic mana for an artifact creature beast at common. It's a 2/1. It's a cleric, rogue, warrior, wizard, and you can pay 2 to add 1 mana of any color. It's a Prismite. It's a Prismite that helps out your party. This one I actually kind of like. If you are, and I think this one, as someone just in chat said, is important. If you are one of the party colors, if you are blue-white, if you are red-black, those are the ones that seem the most interested in a varied party. This is actually pretty dang good. Because you have down a warrior and you're going to play a cleric that cares about the number of party members you have. Cool. This is a rogue, or a wizard in that case. This really helps your party composition when you're determining the amount of party in your party. It's a party. I can keep saying party a lot. That said, it's a 2/1 for 2. It's a Prismite. It helps you fix your mana if there's any need there. I don't know if you play this in black-green or... Man, maybe you play this in every other color. Because in blue-red, this is a wizard spell. In black-white, this is a cleric. Maybe you don't play it in green-white. This card's interesting. This card's interesting. Let's start this at a C+. Let's start this at a C+. I have a hard time thinking this is actually a B, but I think it is like a strong, important C+ in various decks. Let's keep an eye on this card. I think this card might be better in spots than Prismite, which people will compare it to. Oops. Up next, we have Utility Knife. Utility Knife is 1 generic mana for an artifact equipment at common. When Utility Knife enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. Here it is, literally short sword, except an equip cost of 3. Yeah, it's short sword. If you need a short sword, here's your short sword. But try not to need a short sword. You know what you could play instead of this? A 2/2 for 2? A creature? There are decks that obviously are happy with a short sword, decks that are heavy on flyers, decks that are heavy on evasion, decks that are getting rewarded for equipment, stuff like that. But yeah, I think this is kind of D+-ish. There's going to be a few places where you want to play this, but try not to. Try not to. D+. That brings us to lands. We've got Base Camp. Base Camp is an uncommon land. It enters the battlefield tap. Tap it to add a colorless mana. Tap it to add 1 mana of any color. Spend that mana only to cast a Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, or Wizard spell, or to activate an ability of a Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, or Wizard. I don't think I'm ever playing this card. Ever. I'm hurting my mana base, except when I'm casting a party member. Why wouldn't I just play a colored land? I think this is an F. I don't think you ever want to play this card. Like, if you're splashing and the card that you're splashing is a party member, maybe? Otherwise, no. D-, just because maybe you splash a party member. Up next is our cycle of a whole bunch of dual lands. Look at all of these images. That's not one. That's the last card of the set. So all of these are rare dual lands. There are 6 of them. There is green, white, white, black, blue, black, red, green, and red, white, and blue, red. That's all they are. You pick the land that you want. They enter untapped, but they are an island or they are a mountain, and that is it. They are not fetchable via basic land fetch. They're only ever going to be a mountain, so you're not going to get the slight versatility of it being an island. That's rarely ever a problem. These are cards that you'll pick up pretty mid-pack, I think. If you're in those colors, if you're splashing those colors, it's a dual land. Y'all know dual lands. I give them a C basically every time, and these ones are Cs. We do have some other lands kicking in there. We have 2 more to look at. We have Crawling Barrens. Crawling Barrens is a rare land. Tap to add a colorless mana. Pay 4, put 2 +1/+1 counters on Crawling Barrens. Then you may have it become a 0/0 elemental creature until end of turn. It's still a land. This card's fantastic. Might not look fantastic at first, depending on your reading comprehension. My reading comprehension was pretty bad the first time. Pay 4 mana, put 2 counters on it. It does not become a creature unless you want it to, so your opponent doesn't just blow you out and shock it to death. You don't have to tap it. It's a mana sink. You have 4 mana left on your opponent's turn, nothing to do with it. Cool, throw counters on this. Throw counters on it. Just keep throwing counters on it. Eventually this thing is going to be really big, and then you just get to attack with it. I think this card's really good. I don't think it's a bomb. I think it's a control finisher. I think it's a great deck for a deck that wants to go late. I think it's in like the B range. Probably just a B. Probably just a B. but I think it is going to be very good. I don't want to first pick it over removal. Obviously, being the rare, it's probably going to take the spot of the bomb. It's definitely better than in Constructed than in Limited, but I think it still has quite a bit of power in Limited. So let's go with B for Crawling Barrens. I do worry I'm going to pick it like 5th pick, which means I'm never going to actually get to pick it. We'll see. We'll see. And the final card, before we get to the ones that haven't been revealed yet in the rest of this video for those of you watching on YouTube, is Throne of Makindi. Throne of Makindi is a rare land. Tap to add a colorless mana. Pay 1, tap, put a charge counter on it. Tap, remove a charge counter, add 2 mana of any one color. Spend this mana only to cast kicked spells. So this is a blue-green dual land. That's all it is. It's a blue-green dual land that costs some mana to get going. If you're in blue-green kicker, you can play this if you have a spot, but I think it's a pretty middle-of-the-pack pick. It probably even wheels, depending on who else is in blue-green kicker. So I think this is like a C if you're in the blue-green deck, and if you're not, you just don't touch this card. It's an F if you're not in the blue-green deck. Coming into the end of the set review with the last 3 cards that were not available during the Twitch stream is Turn Timber Ascetic. Turn Timber Ascetic is 4 and a green for a creature giant cleric at common. It's a 5/4, and when it enters the battlefield, you gain yourself 3 life. 5/4 for 5 is basically a 5/5 for 5. It more or less passes the vanilla test. It's going to be stompy. It's going to be big. It's going to be very filler. If you are somehow doing party, perhaps you're like Bant party, which is a slight possibility. This is a cleric that could help you out. Gaining life in green probably is very meh. It's just a nice little add-on here. It doesn't make the card that much better. You probably don't have too many other life gain matters things going on. You'd have to be green-white or green-black, I suppose. This is just very filler. It's kind of in the C-C range. You're going to play it when you have to. You're not going to play 2. You're just not going to play this card much, and you're going to pick it pretty late. So C-C for Turn Timber Ascetic. Up next, we have ourselves Cliffhaven Kitesail. Cliffhaven Kitesail is 1 generic mana for an artifact equipment at common. When it ETBs, it automatically equips. The equipped creature has flying at equip cost of 2. I never play this card. We've had this card, we've had Kitesail, we've had Cobbled Wings. I never play them. Some other people play them a little bit more highly. There is a spot for them, and that spot is typically big green stompy decks that maybe don't have, you know, some sort of crazy game-ending bomb, but they've got themselves a 6/6. Maybe like a 6/6 and a 5/5 and a 5/4. And then you just play this, you slap it onto that 6/6, and now you have one of the biggest threats that game will ever see. So yeah, this has a place. It's just a card that I never value, so I probably never really end up with it. I pick this at like a D+. It should not be in every deck. It should be in very specific decks. So be aware of when you should play this. Don't play this just because you're aggro and you want to fly a little bit. You can probably win more games just by playing another creature. So D+ for this. There's a spot for it, but it's not super common. And our final card for today is Skyclave Sentinel. Skyclave Sentinel is 3 generic mana for an artifact creature gargoyle at common. It's a 2/3 with kicker 4. It's got flying, it's got defender. If it was kicked, it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And as long as it has a +1/+1 counter on it, it can attack as though it didn't have defender. So a 2/3 for 3 flying defender is not a card that I'm really in the market for. I don't really want to put that in my deck. It probably ends up as like a C- where I go, oh crap, I don't have 23 cards. I don't know if that's going to happen too much in this format, but maybe it will. For 7 mana, I can get myself a 4/5 flyer. 7 is too expensive for me. A 4/5 flyer is great, but 7 needs to be something more, and 7 often just doesn't make my deck, to be honest. So this card kind of doesn't really fit in most of those places. The one possibility is this could be a black-green card. This costs 1 black-green. This doesn't cost 3 mana, because in the black-green deck, you pay 3, get a 2/3 flyer, you get a counter on this somehow, and then it's going to fly, and you're not going to have had to pay that extra 4 tax. So I think in that deck specifically, assuming you have a number of ways of putting counters on other things, this is probably like a C+ in that one deck. In most decks, it's a C+, maybe even a D, or C-, maybe even a D+. You just don't really want to play this. So that's going to wrap it up for the whole set review. It's all done. Let me know what you think of the green cards, the artifact cards, the land cards, any of the cards down in the comments below. Remember, I'm going to be over on twitch.tv/TheManaLeague Wednesday morning, streaming hours and hours and hours of Zendikar draft. Thanks to Watsy for inviting me to the early access event once again. And of course, all the content as usual will be back here, and I have a plan of getting back to weekly lists. So hopefully I can figure out the time to record those and the quietness and etc. that I need for that. But yeah, let me know anything you want to let me know in the comments down below. As always, you can find me over on Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. You can find me at patreon.com/TheManaLeague if you want to help out that way. That helps the channel go a ton. You get access to the Discord where we chat about magic and games and food and beer and run tournaments and all kinds of stuff like that. But like, share, subscribe, of course, is the easiest, cheapest way. You can do that. That would help out too. And if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, let me know. Otherwise, see y'all next time.